Well, funny seeing you here, especially since I've been adrift at sea for many months. And because, well, we're on a deserted desert island off the western coast of the main continent. A short while ago, I and my ex-fiancé, God rest his soul, along with many others, were running something of a pirate operation, you could say, off the east coast. But the local British government put a stop to that. Since all of our comrades are dead, I guess it's about time that we officially abandon them all and our old base. I doubt that they've been tracking me on my little raft all these months, but no doubt it won't take very long at all before the British find out where we've went. Well, I suppose we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it. Besides, we have a lot of work to do if we're gonna shape up this island into our new base of operations. There is already one big issue with our new island that we've chosen to build our pirate bay and our pirate fortress on, and that's the fact that there's not a lot of wood. More than enough to go about building a proper campfire to cook our meals on like the fish we plan on catching, but a nice pirate caravel to raid the shores? Not so much. Not only does our new island lack any type of tree or cacti for the most part, but it also lacks vegetation in general. We have some agave fruit, but we're going to need to start growing our own food if we plan on surviving here long term, and not only surviving, but thriving. For our first crop, we decided to go with some nice, sturdy onions. Much of the local wildlife wasn't all that entertained by our presence, such as this coyote, which decided to try to hunt us for food. A big mistake on its part. The poor, starved canine came looking for a quick and easy meal, but on the contrary, it would end up being my very first meal in my new home. Ah, we do love a good ironic twist, don't we, lads and lasses? We finished scarfing down some of this delicious dog supper before we were fast asleep, nice and warm on the sand next to the fire, as the salty ocean waves and breeze were coming in and out of the shore, helping us drift off to sleep. You know, this place may be barely hospitable for vegetation and other types of organic life, but I think we're really going to like it here. Besides, the rough conditions of the island should also mean that we don't get too many wandering travelers and what have you with prying eyes. And if we do end up having some wandering traders or travelers or adventurers even, we could just say that we're an onion tycoon, an entrepreneur of sorts, setting up a nice big onion farm on the island to sell to the masses. Speaking of which, we also ended up creating a very small little growing zone of cotton. That way we can harvest a pretty decent size yield of cloth. The reason for this is because any and all ships that are wind powered, and given the time period right now, that's all of them, they are going to need sails, and in turn sails are made of cloth. I think you get the point. However, to get ahead in this world, the number one factor that everyone needs is money. Silver, right? And I think that we're going to make some right now with a bit of honest work. No pirating, no plundering and looting. We are actually going to be taking on a bounty target. Yes, indeed, within the confines of the law, there is a way to go out and kill, and sometimes not kill, like in this case, folks for a bit of silver. It is kind of hypocritical of me, and ironic because we have been the ire of several a bounty hunter in our past as well, being a bandit and a pirate, and yeah, you'll learn more about me as we go, I'm sure, but this time it is us doing the hunting. We arrived at the small tribal outpost, and it appears that our target only has one guard with him. This shouldn't be too hard, but there is only one of me. We'll need to be extremely cautious and diligent as I slowly pulled my raft up to the dock, latching it on, creeping through the night, rifle in hand. Creeping up to the side of one of these buildings, luckily for a silent attack I had a few throwing axes, but I wasn't very successful in this endeavor, and thus it would seem that I would need to let my rifle do the talking for me instead. The bounty target began to rush me, and I began smacking her over the head with the butt of my rifle several times until she collapsed. There was still her friend to deal with, but as she was attempting to crawl away, I snatched her up, still firing my rifle at her companion. These bitches don't know that they're messing with the baddest around. Even shooting my rifle with one hand, I could easily take out some pathetic tribal impid throwing rocks at me, to which I did. Now then, time to tend to those wounds, stuffing them with sand and, I guess, rocks. I'm not sure what else I could put in those to stop the bleeding, but I can't have you dying on me before we get back to the mainland. I am feeling exhausted though, so since you're injured and can't move anyways, maybe I take a quick snooze. Whoa, Nelly, not so fast, little lady. Looks like that little power nap did me some good, and luckily I caught my target right before she got away. It's time for us to head out and to get our money. Thankfully, she was a citizen and also wanted by a nearby tribal government, and it wasn't too far away from our little Onion Island fortress that we're building, so we could easily fulfill the warrant, get our reward money, and be on our way back home. However, I did also notice that there was a prison not too far away, and that there may be a possible prisoner willing to join us. So of course we sailed our winding way around the sandy shores of the continent until we arrived. Just off the beach we could see that it appeared this was a British camp, and there were 2 British soldiers guarding it. Although we're not exactly sure what this gentleman did, we do know that any enemy of the British is a friend of ours. We would mosey on up to the shoreline and then jump out of our little canoe here, but it would seem that they were already on guard and awaiting our arrival. Perhaps they spotted us in the distance. Either way, a bit of a gunfight would break out with myself and the first guard, at which point I would light him on fire and end up killing him. The second bloke was attempting to escape, and though I had shot him in the arm, I would end up letting him go. Perhaps he'll end up bleeding to death in the forest as he runs away. Nevertheless, I wanted to grab a few smoke leaf blunts as well as this other guard's rifle, as I find these to be quite useful. Now then, time to claim our new pirate crew member. We offered our help to him in exchange that he would end up joining us. Funny enough, he was more than ecstatic to do so. And you know what? I think he'll make much better use of this musket than that charred corpse lying on the ground over there. Now then, it's time for us to show our new compadre his new home. So we would set sail, and for about 2 to 3 days, we would travel there, and eventually we would finally make it back home. And just as quickly as we docked at the shore, our new friend Martin suggested that we give this settlement a proper name. And I think that he's right, so we ended up calling it Plundering Fortress. Now this may seem a little bit odd, except for those of you with a keen eye who probably realize that it is named after the name of the island, Plundering Rock. Yes, unfortunately I'm afraid I'm not all that creative, but it is an effective name, you could say. One of the best parts, one of the pros instead of all the cons of sailing for so long, I should say, is by the time that we got back, most of our plants were finally fully grown and ready for harvest, which means that we have plenty of cloth and onions. Now, one of the first things that we ended up using this cloth for was some proper tents. And of course, you know, we want to go about building some sails and stuff so that we can build some proper ships. But if we get killed in our sleep by wild coyotes because we're out in the open, that'll never happen. Speaking of which, though, we would go around and cut down several cacti until we had plenty of wood, and then we would actually begin mining some nearby steel ore veins as well as some compacted machinery for components. All of these resources are going to accumulate in some sailing instruments, some ropes, and also some mast and sails and everything that you need for a ship, of course. And yes, as I'm sure you've guessed by this point, it is finally time that we go about building our very first ship. Not only our first ship, but our very first pirate caravel. Now, this particular type of ship is very important for us as it is loaded up with 3 cannons on each side. Now, I'm sure some of you fine folks are probably pretty familiar with this type of ship and just how powerful they are and just what we can do with them, especially if you had watched the original video where where I showed these off, or maybe the supercut, which you should check out after this, which just so happens to be something of a prelude into these characters and into this world that we're playing in. I probably should have mentioned that earlier. Now then, for the name of our ship, we are going to be naming it the Roaring Onion. Looking back, I kind of wish I would have named it the Blooming Onion, but whatever, this one's fine as well. This is a bit satirical since I made the little quip earlier about this being an onion farm, so I guess it works. We would also go ahead and give it a more fitting paint job given our environment here, and also to maybe kind of give it an onion color scheme, sort of. Now, as mentioned previously, we don't have a lot of wood or trees or cacti or anything like that on this island, so we are going to be using stone blocks for the majority of our construction projects, and so obviously we needed a stone cutting area to go about making these. We were also going to use the cloth that we currently have to make ourselves a storage tent for all of our onions. Now, of course, we could use our food storage barrels, but they would cost more resources and take up more time, so I felt that this was more fitting. We would also use the granite blocks that we had been cutting to make ourselves a covered pot. This pot will allow us to store our food inside like our meals without them deteriorating. And I'm going to level with you, we ended up growing a little bit too much in terms of our onions. We have a lot, so for the time being we're going to start growing some other crops. In particular, some coffee plants, as I feel that the leaves, well, not only will we use them to make us some coffee to make us faster and also feel a lot happier, but we can also sell those to make more money. We may be pirates, but I'd like to have some type of alias where we also make some money, maybe like a money laundering company or something. We'll see how it goes. We also ended up having a trade caravan, a Prussian trade caravan, which was all fine and dandy, and I was actually pretty excited to trade with him to make some money, but how the hell did they get to our island? And how the hell did they know we were here? That would explain how they got out here. Hard to say how they knew that we were here. Perhaps word has spread from our trading on the mainland and they are hearing about a large onion farm. I'm not sure, but we are going to be selling them quite a few items. And we would also end up purchasing a couple for ourselves. A more modernized pistol. Apparently this new invention is known as a revolver. No doubt this will come in very handy, and we also purchased a helmet for Martin, as I feel like it would be good for him to protect his noggin. Yeah, the Prussians were so kind that they even decided to leave us a gift, with it being a wool face mask and a pair of glasses. Our eyesight is fine, so I guess we'll end up selling those too. I do find it a little bit strange that the Prussians aren't exactly familiar with who we are, given our escapades on the east coast of the continent, but I suppose that there are more British forces and fortresses out that way anyhow. Nevertheless, we're tickled. We would, however, be a bit more tickled if we were to, I don't know, maybe take our pirate ship out and do a little bit of plundering. By God, we are pirates after all. It's about time that we acted like it. We had the perfect target, an Impid tribal settlement just a few miles north from our own island. It was the perfect target, of course, because the Impids are hostile with everyone, so nobody's gonna give a shit at all once we kill them all and take all their loot. Something that we've learned over countless years of pirating and banditing in these lands is it really pays to have allies in this world, and when you don't, well, you end up becoming an easy target. Now, just because these Impids don't have allies coming to their aid, that does not mean that they're going to be all that easy. This is an entire settlement of Impids. Now, of course, we have a plan, but they seem to have muskets, and even worse, one of them has a hand mortar. This could be treacherous. Easy target? Yes, but not exactly when you have one ship and two pirates. That is where things get a little bit more difficult. If we can manage to pull this off, it will be interesting, for sure. One of the biggest issues that makes this much harder than we were thinking it was going to be is the fact that they're not as close to the shoreline as we had hoped, meaning that we can't fire directly into their village with our cannons. looks like we're going to have to try to draw them out on foot. Thankfully, we did have the element of darkness and surprise on our side as we crept up on the outskirts of their little village, firing our muskets inward at them, attacking many of their members. Eventually, they would come out to fight with us, and we had killed quite a few of them. We even decided to start burning down some of their homes. And finally, this seemed to be the tipping point that pissed them all off just enough that they would actually start chasing us. Poor foolish bastards, little did they know this would be their end. Although, they almost stopped us when some of them chased us down, but we did manage to get back aboard our ship and open fire. I will say, initially, most of our cannon fire wasn't exactly yielding the best of results, but that is why we have 3 cannons on each side. That way, when we had a bit of a cooldown trying to reload one side, we would just kind of sail around to the other. But this is also only one caravel. Imagine what we can do once we have an entire fleet of ships under our command. The possibilities are endless. For example, using the one ship that we currently have, we have actually indeed managed to win this battle. Though yes, we took quite a bit of damage and it took a very long time and was incredibly difficult. In the end, this settlement was ours. Now it's time for us to finally begin checking out our new settlement that we've taken by blood and by force. And funny enough, they had, well, it wasn't a lot of silver, it was a teeny tiny bit, but they actually had quite a bit of gold, just right around or just under 130. I never would have guessed that a bunch of tribal impids would have had a fortune this vast, but we'll take it. Now, of course, we couldn't just leave this settlement intact. The impids may come back and rebuild and reform even larger, which would be very difficult for us to try and attack once more, and also because, well, our island doesn't have a lot of wood or the possibility for wood, so we began deconstructing all of their buildings here to take back home with us for possible ships and docks and anything and everything that required wood. Now, they also had a great big field of tobacco plants that were ripe for harvest, so of course we began cutting down those plants into their leaves. That way we could attempt to sell them. Now, I know I'm focusing a lot on stealing the impids' resources, but we did take many days to get here sailing, and also we worked very hard to take this settlement, so I think we deserve it. Speaking of making profits off the backs of others' labor, we decided to take all these tobacco leaves, some of the jade, and some of the tea leaves that we had harvested to a nearby mainland settlement to make a good bit of money. We would then finally return back home several days later with all of our bounty and loot and everything that we had plundered. I decided to give the hand mortar to Martin, as he is currently our right-hand man, and he's most likely going to stay that way, so he's the only other person I would trust with it. I mean, there's only 2 of us, but you know what I mean. And now that we finally have plenty of wood, so much wood that honestly we didn't really know what to do with it all, I think it's finally time for a proper construction project. A great big old massive dock that will be able to house our entire fleet of ships, and not only that, of course, it's going to be a much more convenient place for traders and other travelers looking to purchase maybe some coffee beans or onions or whatever else they want to trade with us to dock their own ships. However, docks are a tedious and time-consuming project, so we'll check back in on it later. I wanted to mention the fact in the meantime that we had an iguana self-tame while we were doing all of our construction, so if you fine folks have a name for our little green pet, be sure to leave that in the comment section down below. A little bit of time later, and we also were able to harvest our very first yield of coffee beans. And we would actually end up starting to brew a little bit of these beans for ourselves into some delicious hot coffee. Nothing better than a good old cup of joe. Not only was it delicious, but it also gave us a +3 mood buff, which isn't much, but it's pretty good. And not only that, as you can see, it also will suppress our tiredness, meaning that we can work longer hours, which is going to be great for finishing up this big old dock. While Miz is back at base working on that, we're also going to have Martin travel out in the ship to do some more trading with local tribal governments. We, personally, absolutely love our own onion stews and our hot cups of joe, and we thought that the rest of the mainland might enjoy it as well, and also pay us a handsome sum for it. After several days of sailing back and forth, we would finally return home, and as you can see, our dock is finally finished. It was time for us to unload the ship's cargo, which was mostly our food, but also a good bit of silver that we had made off our trading. We also ended up getting a new weapon, some fire bombs. Since Miz is an impid, it seemed more fitting to let Martin have these as well, and this way both of them shouldn't have much of an issue burning down any of the villages that we pillage. You can think of these as a ye old pirate grenade, if you will. We had also purchased a book. Right now we only have the one, but at some point we would like to have a grand library filled with many a tale of fiction and also maybe even real life. And best of all, Martin's favorite, we also purchased some double-aged Scotch whiskey. You know, just to celebrate and commemorate all of our accomplishments thus far. But a pirate's work is never done. It's time for us to start improving our camps with some little logs by our tents to keep them fueled throughout the night and keep us warm, of course, when things get a bit cool and chilly out, as well as some camp lodgings. This is kind of the same as having a bed with a dresser and an end table. It just increases their mood. We were also beginning to have some storage issues, and so far we have completely filled up our storage tents with all of our onions that we've been eating on, so we started digging a few pits, and the reason for this is because we're going to put all of our coffee beans, our money, and other items down in there to keep them safe and also keep them from deteriorating and being eaten by wild animals and, you know, that kind of thing. We would also end up building ourselves a tailoring bench. Now, since we've been growing all the cotton, we have a good bit of cloth still in storage, and I felt that it would probably be appropriate for us to start making ourselves some proper pirating clothes, starting off with Miz herself, our pirate captain, giving her a proper black bicorn hat that matches her current attire and also is very reminiscent of the last captain we had, who just so happened to be her fiancé, as he wore one as well, almost as if in his honor. We also would make her a monocle to express and accentuate the fact that we are not just any ordinary pirates. I'm not quite sure what to call us. Maybe we become some type of mercenary pirates, but we're also focused on making a vast fortune in other ways as well. With such a large camp that we are building here, we also need some proper defenses, and for now we're going to be sticking with some very simple ones, with those being wooden barricades. Currently we haven't really experienced any issues with enemies attacking us here on the island, as they would have to sail from the mainland, so I don't think initially we're really going to have any trouble, but eventually trouble will find us. And with that, I also want to just spruce up the camp a little bit here by building some proper street lamps that are going to light our way day or night, and also we're going to be building some proper granite streets. Eventually, I want to turn this into a booming pirate city, a true capital for us here. But for now, this is pretty decent, I suppose. And finally, the cherry on top of it all is going to be a proper flagpole right in the center of our camp, flying our beautiful skull and bones, towering above us all with prominence and power. And with that, my friends, I feel that we have achieved enough for one episode, being the first episode to really get us started. I want to ask you if you could, and I try not to ask this too much because I know it's annoying, but please like and subscribe and all that great stuff, as it really does help out the algorithm, and especially on these episode 1 of the series videos, I always want to try to boost them as much as possible, so if you can, I would really appreciate it, and I love you, thank you. But only time shall tell, my friends. Will we build a pirate empire, a pirate mercenary company empire, I suppose, that will stand the test of time and possibly even have a naval power that will be able to match that of the British Empire? I suppose we'll have to find out. See you later.